Our comments are going to be initiated in a very special way. We're going to use a special character to notate our comments. That character in the MATLAB programming language is the %sign. The character that you would use to notate a comment tends to vary from language to language. If you find yourself learning another language, either for pleasure or for work, because you need it for a project or because you needed to interact with some software that you were given or something like that, be very cautious with this, that you look up what that syntax is. Okay, in the MATLAB programming language, a comment is initiated with the %sign. This is my comment. Comments are ignored by the interpreter. They're shown in green text. When I run this code, it appears that nothing is happening as a result of the comment. Now, a single %sign is a comment, or a single line comment, if you will. You can also do block comments. Be very careful with the syntax here. Students sometimes forget it. It's % open curly bracket, % close curly bracket. And you see how this line appeared here? Anything you would want inside that comment is going to go on lines between the brackets. Be careful with the bracket order here in particular. Some people forget those. Okay. If I run this code again, you see that nothing happens. The comment is ignored by the interpreter. Okay. There is a very special kind of commenting feature. We sometimes call this cell mode, and that's two %signs listed next to each other. This is a cell or a section, if you will. So now you see with the double %sign, it appears that I've broken up the code into segments, or sections, if you will. This can be useful for organization. It can be also useful if you only want to look at certain aspects of the code at one particular time. If you want to run one of the cells by itself, click in the cell so that it highlights, and then select Run Section. So the only thing in that section was comments, which the interpreter ignores, and the CLC command. Well, CLC deletes the contents of the command window, the display from the command window, so that's all that occurs. If I come down here and I put my cursor inside the other cell and I hit Run Section, well, now I've run only that section. Okay? You'll probably notice in the current folder pane another file has appeared, lecture2.m with a tilde here. This is an autosave file. We're not going to do anything with them. For those of you using Macs, you'll see the tilde. For those of you using Windows operating systems, the autosave file actually has the extension .asv. In either case, we're not going to work with these autosave files directly. Do not submit them for grading. You're only going to be submitting .m files as your code. Okay, just wanted to draw that to your attention while we're here. Okay, so in elementary algebra, you were likely instructed on orders of operations. In mathematical language, we sometimes talk about this as order of precedence. The order generally is parentheses. Isn't it useful that I can write comments in my code? Exponents, multiplication and division, these have equal precedence. So you merely work from left to right in case of multiplication and division. One does not superior to the other. And addition and subtraction. Again, same story, equal precedence. Okay? So if I had an operation z equals x, or 2 plus 2 times 3, for example, what would come first? Well, the parentheses would. So I do everything inside the parentheses. 2 plus 2, well, that's going to give me 4. 4 times 3 is 12. And when I run this section, I see that the result was 12. So the same rules from algebra apply here. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally as a mnemonic that some people like to use. Very convenient to always remember to save periodically. Now, one thing I did want to show you is that you can store multiple pieces of information. We'll do more with this in lecture 3, but I want to merely plant the seed, if you will. So if I want to group two pieces of information together, I can do so with the hard brackets. When I run this code, you see that I have two pieces of information in the variable A. I have two pieces of information in the variable B. I can perform mathematical operations with this information. For example, if I want to find what's the product of A and B, the contents of A and B, so first element of A times the first element of B, second element of A times the second element of B, I can perform an element by element operation on those data sets. So C equals A dot times B. The period operator in front of the times symbol, multiplication symbol, is an indication to the interpreter that we want an element by element operation. If you were to omit the period, MATLAB will attempt to do a linear algebra operation. Linear algebra is not or at least a formal college level course in linear algebra is not a prerequisite for this course, although you may, depending on your mathematics training, encountered some of topics in linear algebra in middle school or high school algebra. In this particular case, we're going to use the element by element operation, so we're going to use that period operator. It turns out that if you were to try to perform a linear algebra matrix multiplication on that data set, like this, without the period operator, you actually get an error because the result is not mathematically defined for a matrix of these dimensions. So just keep in mind, dot times for an element by element multiplication, dot divide for an element by element division. You do not need it for addition or subtraction. Finally, there are a couple default variables that I'd like you to be familiar with, besides just ants, which we've already talked about. Pi is 3.14159. There are more digits stored in memory that are shown here in the command window. So we'll call it E, for example, or run the section. E is equal to the value of pi. There are more values stored than what's displayed in the command window. It's actually quite accurate. I would encourage you to use it rather than defining your own values of pi. I is also defined, the imaginary number. So here it displays as 0 plus 1i. So there's 0 real component and there's a magnitude of 1 in the imaginary direction. For those of you that prefer J, for example, some electrical engineers prefer J, same story. Now, be very careful. You can overwrite this. So now that I've said I is equal to 5, 5 times I is 25. If you clear it and then display the new one, it'll reset back to. So if you ever overwrite a default variable, if you clear that variable, it'll go back to the default. Another useful variable is who, which lists the variables that are currently in use. If you require additional information, you can always use whos. This command also gives you the size of the variables and some additional information, not all of which is applicable to this stage of the course. But this is always a technique that you could make use of.